In a 2010 study, researchers found that around 4% of CEOs exhibit psychopathic traits, 4 times the rate in the general population. Think about that for a moment. That's not just a surprising statistic, it's a revelation. It forces us to ask, are the qualities that make someone a successful leader, someone who can rise to the top of an organization, inherently tied to dark, psychopathic traits? And if so, what does that mean for the rest of us? Could you or I unknowingly interact with a psychopath every day without ever realizing it? Now, before you go picturing a Hollywood-style villain, let's clear something up. Psychopaths don't all look like serial killers or masterminds from crime dramas. In fact, most of them don't. Many of them wear suits, smile in meetings, and charm their way through life. They're the kind of people who can blend in so seamlessly that you might never suspect the calculating, manipulative mind beneath the surface. But here's the thing, once you know how to spot them, you'll never look at the world the same way again. The psychology of a psychopath is a labyrinth of contradictions, intelligent yet reckless, charming yet callous, ambitious yet devoid of empathy. It's a topic that has fascinated researchers for decades, and today we're diving deep into the dark psychology secrets of a psychopath. Together, we'll unravel what makes them tick, how they manipulate others, and most importantly, how you can protect yourself from their influence. Because, trust me, they're out there, maybe closer than you think. Let's start with what defines a psychopath. Psychologists often use the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, a tool developed by Dr. Robert Hare to assess psychopathic traits. It's a list of 20 characteristics, ranging from superficial charm to pathological lying, lack of remorse, and a parasitic lifestyle. But here's the kicker, not all psychopaths exhibit every single trait. Think of it as a spectrum. Some score higher than others, and their behaviors manifest in different ways depending on their environment, upbringing, and personal goals.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
Take charm, for example. Psychopaths are often described as magnetic, even captivating. They have an uncanny ability to make you feel like you're the most important person in the room. But this charm is far from genuine. It's a tool, a means to an end. In a 2002 experiment by Vrij and colleagues, researchers found that psychopaths are significantly better at lying convincingly than non-psychopaths. Why? Because they don't experience the same physiological stress responses, like increased heart rate or sweating, that most people do when they're deceitful. Their lies flow effortlessly, and they can tailor their stories to exploit your emotions, your trust, your vulnerabilities. So, how do they do it? How do psychopaths seem to know exactly how to manipulate others? The answer lies in their cognitive empathy. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, because psychopaths are famously lacking in emotional empathy, the ability to feel what others are feeling. But cognitive empathy, that's their superpower. They can analyze your emotions, predict your reactions, and use that information to control you. Imagine someone who can read your mind, not to connect with you, but to use your thoughts against you. Scary, right? Here's a real-world example to bring this into focus. In a study published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, researchers tested how psychopaths respond to emotional cues. They found that while psychopaths don't feel the emotions themselves, they're highly skilled at recognizing them in others. This ability gives them a strategic advantage in social situations. Let's say you're angry. A psychopath might not feel anger themselves, but they'll recognize your emotional state and use it to push your buttons, manipulate your decisions, or even make you doubt your own perceptions. But what about their lack of remorse? This is one of the most chilling aspects of psychopathy. Imagine doing something that causes significant harm to another person, whether it's physical, emotional, or financial, and feeling nothing. No guilt, no shame, no regret. That's the mind of a psychopath. In a 2011 fMRI study led by Dr. Adrian Rain, researchers scanned the brains of individuals with high psychopathic traits, but they found reduced activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotions like fear and guilt. This neurological difference makes it easier for psychopaths to commit acts that most of us would find unthinkable. But here's where it gets even more fascinating and terrifying. Psychopaths don't see their lack of remorse as a flaw. In fact, they often view it as a strength. To them, emotions are weaknesses, vulnerabilities that make people easy to manipulate. This mindset allows them to function in high-stress environments without being weighed down by the emotional baggage that might hinder others. That's why you'll find psychopaths in positions of power, CEOs, politicians, surgeons, even lawyers. Their ability to stay calm under pressure and make ruthless decisions gives them a competitive edge. Now, let's talk about control. Psychopaths crave power, and they'll go to great lengths to achieve it. But their methods are often subtle, almost imperceptible, at least at first. It starts with manipulation. They might flatter you, make you feel special, or offer you something you desperately want. But once they've gained your trust, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they're exploiting your weaknesses, isolating you from others, or using you as a pawn in their schemes. It's a process called gaslighting, and it's one of their most effective tools. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation that makes you question your own reality. Imagine someone telling you that an event you clearly remember never happened, or that your feelings are irrational and baseless. Over time, this erodes your confidence and makes you dependent on the manipulator for validation. Psychopaths excel at this because they're masters of deception. They can lie with such conviction that you start to doubt your own memories, perceptions, and instincts. But here's the silver lining: once you understand their tactics, you can protect yourself. The first step is awareness. Pay attention to patterns of behavior that don't add up, like someone who's overly charming but never seems to show genuine emotion, or someone who constantly twists the truth to serve their own agenda. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Another key strategy is setting boundaries. Psychopaths thrive on control, so the more you assert your independence, the less power they have over you. This might mean cutting ties with toxic individuals, seeking support from trusted friends or professionals, or simply refusing to engage in their mind games. Remember, you're not alone. Psychopaths may be skilled manipulators, but they're not invincible. Armed with knowledge and self-awareness, you can outsmart even the most cunning among them. Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding psychopathic traits and manipulation tactics, let's dig even deeper into the dark psychology secrets of a psychopath. It's not just about what they do, it's about why they do it. What drives someone to manipulate, harm, or exploit others without a shred of remorse? To answer this, we need to explore the core motivations and inner world of a psychopath, which, as you'll see, is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Psychopaths are often driven by a need for stimulation. Their brains are wired differently, particularly in how they process rewards and risks. In a groundbreaking 2013 study by Buchholz and colleagues, researchers used MRI scans to observe the brains of individuals with psychopathic traits. They discovered that psychopaths have hyperactive dopamine systems. Dopamine, often called the feel-good neurotransmitter, is responsible for pleasure and reward. For psychopaths, the rush of dopamine is so powerful that it overrides their ability to consider potential consequences. This is why they often engage in impulsive or reckless behavior. They're addicted to the thrill. But it's not just about stimulation. Psychopaths also have an insatiable need for control. To them, life is a game and other people are merely pieces on the board. This mindset often starts early. In a 2012 longitudinal study published in Development and Psychopathology, researchers found that children who later displayed psychopathic traits often exhibited callous, unemotional behaviors as early as age 3. These behaviors included a lack of guilt after misbehaving, an absence of empathy, and a tendency to manipulate others, even in preschool settings. Over time, these traits can evolve into the calculated, predatory behaviors we associate with adult psychopaths. But here's the twist: psychopaths don't see themselves as the bad guys. In fact, many of them believe they're superior to others. This sense of superiority, combined with their lack of empathy, creates a dangerous cocktail. They view emotions like compassion, love, and guilt as weaknesses, flaws that make people easy to exploit. To a psychopath, the world is divided into two types of people: predators and prey, and they'll do whatever it takes to ensure they're never the latter. Let's pause to consider a question: how does someone become a psychopath? Is it nature, nurture, or a mix of both? The answer, as with most things in psychology, is complicated. Research suggests that psychopathy is about 50% genetic and 50% environmental. On the genetic side, studies of twins have shown a strong hereditary component to traits like impulsivity, aggression, and lack of empathy. But genetics alone don't tell the whole story. Environmental factors like childhood abuse, neglect, or trauma can also play a significant role in shaping psychopathic behavior. For example, imagine a child who grows up in a chaotic household. They learn early on that emotions are dangerous, that showing vulnerability leads to pain. Over time, they might suppress their feelings, developing a cold, detached demeanor as a survival mechanism. Add a genetic predisposition to psychopathy, and you have a recipe for a dangerous individual. But not all children with these experiences become psychopaths, which raises another fascinating question: can psychopathy be prevented? The short answer is maybe. Early intervention is key. In a 2009 study published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry, researchers found that children with callous, unemotional traits responded positively to interventions that focused on building emotional awareness and empathy. Techniques like role-playing, mindfulness, and emotional coaching showed promise in reducing antisocial behaviors. This suggests that while psychopathy may not be curable, its impact can be mitigated, at least in some cases. But let's shift gears for a moment. We've talked about the dark side of psychopathy, but is there a light side? Can psychopathic traits ever be used for good? Believe it or not, the answer is yes. Some researchers argue that certain psychopathic traits, like fearlessness, charm, and mental toughness, can be advantageous in specific contexts. For example, soldiers, surgeons, and entrepreneurs often display traits that overlap with psychopathy. The difference is that these individuals channel their traits in ways that benefit society rather than harm it. Take surgeons, for instance. In a high-pressure operating room, emotions like fear or guilt can be paralyzing. A surgeon with psychopathic traits might be able to stay calm, focused, and decisive in situations where others might crumble. Similarly, an entrepreneur with a high tolerance for risk might be willing to take bold chances that lead to groundbreaking innovations. The key distinction here is intent. While psychopaths manipulate and exploit for personal gain, individuals with psychopathic traits who lack malicious intent can use those traits to achieve remarkable things. But this brings us to an important question: if psychopathic traits can sometimes be beneficial, how do we distinguish between a functional psychopath and a dangerous one? The answer lies in their level of self-awareness and their ability to regulate their behavior. Functional psychopaths, sometimes called adaptive psychopaths, tend to have a higher degree of self-control. They understand their tendencies and consciously choose to channel them in constructive ways. Dangerous psychopaths, on the other hand, are ruled by their impulses and have little regard for the well-being of others. So how can you protect yourself from the latter? One of the most effective strategies is to cultivate emotional resilience. Psychopaths prey on vulnerability, so the stronger and more self-assured you are, the harder it is for them to manipulate you. This means setting clear boundaries, learning to say no, and trusting your instincts. If someone's behavior consistently makes you feel uneasy, don't ignore that feeling. It's your brain's way of warning you that something isn't right. Another powerful tool is education. The more you understand about psychopathy, the less likely you are to fall victim to their tactics. For example, knowing that psychopaths often use charm as a weapon can help you recognize when someone's flattery is insincere. Similarly, understanding gaslighting can make it easier to spot when someone is trying to distort your sense of reality. But here's where it gets tricky. Not all psychopaths are overtly malicious. Some are subtle, almost imperceptible in their manipulation. They might not lie outright, but they'll withhold key information. They might not insult you directly, but they'll plant seeds of doubt that erode your confidence over time. This is why it's so important to stay vigilant and trust your gut. If someone constantly makes you feel confused, anxious, or off balance, there's a good chance they're not acting in your best interest. Before we continue, let's take a moment to reflect. By now, we've covered a lot of ground, from the neurological underpinnings of psychopathy to their methods of manipulation, and even their potential for good. But there's still so much more to uncover, including the deeper psychological conflicts that drive their behavior and the practical steps you can take to protect yourself and others. Now that we've explored the foundation of psychopathy, their traits, motivations, and how they manipulate others, let's unravel the inner workings of their psychology. Because here's the truth beneath the charm, cunning, and calculated control: psychopaths are far more complex than they first appear. And understanding this complexity is crucial, not just for protecting yourself, but for gaining insight into the darker corners of human nature itself. Let's start with one of the most counterintuitive aspects of psychopathy: their emotions. You might assume that psychopaths don't feel anything at all, but that's not entirely true. They're not robots, but they do experience emotions, but in a profoundly different way than most people. For example, while they might feel frustration, envy, or even anger, they rarely experience deeper, more vulnerable emotions like love, guilt, or sadness. And here's the kicker: when they do feel something, it's often short-lived and shallow. It's as if their emotional range is stuck in black and white, while the rest of us live in full color. This emotional detachment is both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. On one hand, it allows them to stay cool under pressure, make ruthless decisions, and manipulate others without hesitation. But on the other hand, it leaves them disconnected from the very things that give life meaning, real relationships, genuine joy, and a sense of purpose beyond personal gain. In a way, the psychopath's greatest tragedy is that they'll never truly understand the richness of human connection. And yet, they often don't care. Why? Because to them, relationships aren't about connection, they're about control. Psychopaths view relationships as transactional. Every interaction is a means to an end, whether it's gaining power, status, or resources. This is why they're so skilled at identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities. In a fascinating 2013 study published in Personality and Individual Differences, researchers found that individuals with high levels of psychopathy could accurately identify people who were more submissive, insecure, or emotionally dependent. These are the people they target because they're easier to manipulate. It's like a predator singling out the weakest member of the herd. But here's something even more chilling: psychopaths don't just exploit vulnerabilities, they create them. Imagine this scenario: you meet someone who seems perfect. They're charming, attentive, and make you feel like you're the center of their world. But as time goes on, subtle changes start to occur. They criticize you in ways that seem small but leave you doubting yourself. They isolate you from friends and family, framing it as just wanting to spend more time together. They gaslight you, making you question your own perceptions and memories. Before you know it, you're trapped in a web of control, unsure of how you got there or how to escape. This process is called trauma bonding, and it's one of the most insidious tools in a psychopath's arsenal. Trauma bonding occurs when a victim becomes emotionally attached to their abuser through a cycle of manipulation, fear, and reward. It's a psychological trap that's incredibly difficult to break because it messes with the brain's reward system. When the abuser alternates between kindness and cruelty, the victim's brain releases dopamine during the kind moments, reinforcing the bond. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You never know when the next reward is coming, so you keep going back, hoping for a payoff. Psychopaths understand this intuitively, and they use it to maintain control over their victims. Now, let's dig into another fascinating aspect of psychopathy: their relationship with fear. Most of us experience fear as a natural, even protective response to danger. It's what keeps us from taking reckless risks or putting ourselves in harm's way. But for psychopaths, fear functions differently, if it exists at all. In a 2001 study by Blair et al., researchers found that psychopaths have a reduced ability to recognize fear in others and a diminished fear response themselves. This is due to abnormalities in the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear and other emotions. As a result, psychopaths are more likely to take extreme risks, whether it's in their personal lives, professional endeavors, or criminal activities. This lack of fear can make them incredibly dangerous, but it also explains why they're often so successful in high-stakes environments. Think about it: in a situation where everyone else is paralyzed by anxiety or second-guessing their decisions, the psychopath remains calm, focused, and laser-sharp. This is why you'll find them thriving in roles that require quick thinking and emotional detachment, like stock trading, emergency surgery, or even military command. But while their fearlessness can be an asset, it's also their Achilles heel. Because they don't fear consequences, they often overreach, take unnecessary risks, and ultimately self-destruct. And this brings us to a crucial question: can a psychopath ever truly change? Can someone so emotionally detached, so manipulative, so devoid of empathy ever be rehabilitated? The answer, unfortunately, is complicated. Studies have shown that traditional therapy often doesn't work for psychopaths. In fact, it can make them worse. Why? Because they don't view therapy as a tool for personal growth. Instead, they see it as a new arena for manipulation. In group therapy settings, for example, psychopaths have been known to use what they learn about others' vulnerabilities to exploit them outside of sessions. It's a chilling reminder that their mindset is fundamentally different from ours. That said, some researchers believe that certain psychopathic traits can be managed, if not eliminated entirely. The key lies in focusing on behavioral change rather than emotional insight. For example, instead of trying to teach a psychopath to feel empathy, a near impossible task, you might focus on teaching them that prosocial behaviors like honesty or cooperation are in their own best interest. This approach, called contingency management, has shown some promise, but it's far from a cure. So, where does that leave us? If psychopaths are unlikely to change, and if traditional therapy often fails, how can society deal with them? The answer lies in education, prevention, and accountability. By educating people about psychopathy, how to recognize it, how to protect themselves, and how to set firm boundaries, we can reduce the damage they cause. At the same time, holding psychopaths accountable for their actions, whether through legal consequences or social ostracism, can limit their ability to harm others. But here's the deeper question: what can we learn from psychopaths? As dark and unsettling as their psychology may be, it also offers profound insights into human nature. For example, their ability to remain calm under pressure reminds us of the importance of emotional regulation. Their focus on goals, despite their lack of empathy, highlights the power of determination and resilience. And their manipulative tactics serve as a stark reminder of how important it is to develop self-awareness, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. Ultimately, understanding the dark psychology secrets of a psychopath isn't just about them, it's about us. It's about recognizing our own vulnerabilities, our own blind spots, and our own capacity for both good and evil. Because while most of us will never be psychopaths, we all have the potential to manipulate, deceive, or harm others if we're not careful. By studying the extremes of human behavior, we can better understand ourselves and perhaps become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate as a result. So, as we wrap up this exploration, I'll leave you with one final question. Knowing what you now know about psychopaths, how will you use this knowledge to protect yourself and to better understand the people around you?